Hello, everyone. My name is Anshuman, and I'm going to be hosting the session today, which is around how to switch from service companies to product companies. Now, before I begin, let me lay out of what we'll cover today. One is obviously just some introduction about me, some introduction about what service companies and product companies are. And the third piece is what are the steps to get there, and just doing a little bit of deep dive there. We will also reserve some time in today's session to take questions from all of you and answer those questions in the best of my capacity. All right, so without further ado, let me get started. My name is Anshuman Singh. I am one of the co-founders at Scalar Academy, and I'm a software engineer myself. I was with Facebook when I started my career. I was the lead for the team that was building Facebook Messenger. And later on, I helped set up the Facebook London office along with a few other engineers, which was the first engineering office for Facebook outside of the United States. That's my introduction. And post that, I've been running InterviewBit and Scalar Academy. Both have gotten to talk to like thousands of people now, thousands of students now, and therefore have a few learnings from there, which I would love to share with all of you guys. Now, before we get started with the session, let me first define what service companies are and what product companies are, and why even look at a switch from a service company to product company. So service companies are companies where they would go and get projects from other companies that don't have enough software engineering capacity, and they would execute the project on that client client company's behalf. So for example, let's say I am a TCS, data consultancy service, or an Infosys or a Wipro or Cognizant. I am a service company. I would go and fetch a project, imagine from, let's say, Indian government. And let's say Indian government wants to get a particular website built. For example, we recently had COVID vaccination. Hypothetically, imagine Indian government wanted a COVID vaccination website built. So then that TCS, for example, takes that project and goes ahead and tries to implement that on the behalf of the Indian government. So that's what service companies do. Product companies are companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Flipkart, Myntra, Google, who would build products right for the end audience. Now, the end audience could be a consumer like you and me, or the end audience could also be another company. For example, Slack is a messaging tool which is used by companies, B2B. Businesses use Slack, and therefore businesses are the consumers. There's slight differences in the kind of working style of service companies and product companies, and there is a decent amount of difference in the pay scale across service and product companies. What you would find is that service companies focus a lot on your tech stack. They focus on what programming languages do you know, what is your years of experience with that particular tech stack. So for example, a Java 4-year experienced person would be paid lesser than a Java 7 years experienced person. Or let's say you're defined as a .NET developer, or you're defined as a React.js developer, or let's say a Python developer, etc. So you tie to your tech stack. And it's not the fault of service companies. It's just the nature of the business. When they go to a client, the client would check with them, hey, look, my project is in Java. How many Java engineers do you have? I need these many senior Java engineers, these many junior Java engineers. On the contrary, product companies focus more on getting something delivered. So for example, if a big billion sale is coming up in Flipkart, then they would want a certain set of features built, or a certain set of infrastructure in place to make sure the site does not go down. And that is what you deliver. Your tech stack does not matter. What matters is, can you quickly learn and then build something? Building capacity matters. Your tech stack is considered as a tool, and therefore that does not matter. So some fundamental differences there. In terms of pay scale, at least in India, there is a lot of difference in pay scales across service and product companies. Again, like not all service companies are equal, not all product companies are equal. But if you look at maybe 75 percentile salary in product companies versus 75 percentile salary in service companies, typically there is approximately 4 to 5x increase when you look at salaries in product companies. And I'm taking example of companies like Amazon, etc., which pay a little on the higher side. Most, in fact, like startups that you find, new age startups, new unicorns that you see in news daily, they are all product companies, and they usually pay a lot on the higher side. So now, whether you should move to a product company or not, that's very dependent, or it's a personal choice. That being said, I mean, if you are currently in a service company, moving to the product companies is not just as simple as interviewing at that company. There is a lot of learning to happen before you can make the move. So I'm going to talk about those steps. If at all you're somebody who aspires to move from a service to product company, what are the steps you should take? I would talk in today's session about that. All right. Okay. Okay. Awesome. 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 Glad to see all of you here. Glad to see everybody here. Okay. Awesome. So let's start with steps. And I'm going to be scribbling a lot on my iPad when I talk about these steps. Following is what I have seen to work. One is, I mean, whenever you start any new journey that is going to take a lot of time, the first step usually is, and this is a little softer aspect, but the first step is believing that something is feasible. One of the things that I usually notice a lot of times, a lot of us are very underconfident, and then we give up very easily. Note that when you take up this journey, it is going to take you time. It's not going to happen in a month. It's not going to happen in 2 months. This is probably a 6 months or a year long journey. It is going to take time. Give yourself that space. Understand that this will take hard work. Believe that it is possible. The first step is usually believing. So believe it is possible, and then the real journey starts. The second step is understanding what should you learn to be at a product company. So I'm going to talk about in general, and this is more or less, I would say, the curriculum for a software developer in general. So I'll talk about like the curriculum to get into product companies in some detail, and I will talk about that in context of two things. Is it relevant for interviews? Is it relevant for your job performance? Because when you look at switching to a product company, it is not only okay to prepare for interviews. You also have to make sure when you do get into those product companies, you're able to perform really, really well after being at that company, right? So I'm going to cover both aspects. So let me actually create a 3-column thing here. So imagine I have topics and the relevance of those topics for interviews. And please don't mind my handwriting. I'm very, very bad at handwriting. And the relevance of the same thing for job performance. The first thing that is important, and this is something you would have heard a lot of times now, is what a lot of people call as DSA plus problem solving. I'll just talk about what this is. So DSA expands to what is called as data structures and algorithms. This is, think of data structures and algorithms as recipes of solving complex problems in the computer science space. And like these problems could be problems that you would probably be able to solve immediately in less than an hour by writing code, or these could be problems that would take you a few days to solve. Both kinds of problems exist. In these, there is a big debate on the internet whether data structures and algorithm actually helps you with your job performance or not. But before I get into the job performance, let me first talk about whether this is important for interviews or not. Data structures algorithm is actually very important for all levels of interviews in product companies. So if you have, let's say, 5 years of experience, 10 years of experience, 15 years of experience, does not matter, irrespective of the levels, as long as you're an individual contributor or you are a young manager in software engineering, most probably you will have at least a few rounds on data structures and algorithms. Even if you are a data scientist or a data engineer, chances are your first couple of rounds are going to be on data structures and algorithms. So this is across all levels. And the more junior you are, the more stress would be on data structures and algorithms. So all levels, SD1 plus all levels, this is important, and this is fairly important, very, very important. There are some companies that probably only test on this. For example, a company like Google tests majorly 90% plus only on data structures and algorithms. A company like Amazon would have probably 70-80% focus on data structures and algorithms. So there is a heavy focus on data structures and algorithms. Now the question is, how does this actually help me in my job performance? You'll find that most of the time you don't solve problems as complex as is required to be really, really good at DSA or problem solving. However, like there are ways in which it actually helps you with your job performance as well. One of the things is, like, if you are if you solve a lot of problems on DSA, if you practice a lot of problems on DSA, one of the things that starts to happen in some time is that your coding accuracy becomes better. You'll write code, and that code would probably compile and run in the first go. It takes time, but it starts to happen after a while. And why is that important? That is important because if you look at a software engineer typically spends X amount of time writing the code, but 10x amount of time debugging and testing that code. Now, if your coding accuracy is very high, then the amount of time you spend on testing the code or debugging the code, that goes down because number of iterations you have to do, that reduces. So there is an indirect effect. One is your coding accuracy increases, and that in turn actually increases your productivity. So your productivity, or like the amount of actual code you can deploy in the same amount of time, that increases. The second thing that actually does is that, yes, I mean, 95% of the time you might not face problem statements that would use DSA, but 5% of the time you would. And how you perform during those 5% of the times, that determines the performance of whatever you're building, how much of infrastructural cost, what your code takes, and that defines whether you are a good engineer or a great engineer. So there is some level of relevance to job performance as well. But this is basically good versus great. There is some level of impact there. Apart from this, now this is the second topic that I'm going to discuss. This is not very important for interviews, but it is important for you to, if you're thinking about your career as a software engineer, if you're thinking about your career being a 40-year-long journey. I mean, most of us probably graduate from college around 20, 21, 22, 23 years or so. And then we'll retire around 60 years if you don't already become too rich to work. Then it's approximately a 40-year journey, right? So if you look at software engineering as a 40-year journey, one of the base of the pyramid of your journey, of your software engineering, is computer science fundamentals, CS fundamentals. Now, CS fundamentals are stuff around operating system. How does memory management in operating system work? How does your operating system handle various things, right? And this is, if you're going to work at any large scale company, you'll be working on remote servers, distributed systems, where your code will be running on some machine. When your code goes slow, or when, let's say, your application starts running slow, just understanding why it is going slow will only happen if you understand how your operating systems work. Very similarly, databases, chances are you will be definitely working with a bunch of databases in your life cycle as a software engineer, be it irrespective. If you're a front-end engineer, back-end engineer, full-stack engineer, you will be interacting with databases, and therefore it's important to understand how databases work. And networking, again, across all kinds of engineers, networking is equally important. I mean, just telling you privately, I got a D grade in networking in my college, so which was the worst grade possible, apart from not failing. And then I felt the gap when I did my first job with Facebook. The first year, therefore, I spent additional amount of time learning things around networking. So very, very important for job performance, and it will help you all throughout your career. Not so important for interviews. Might be important for entry-level interviews. For example, if you're just a college graduate right now, and then you're going for a product company interview, then it might be important, but otherwise not so much. Then the next segment I'm going to talk about is for people who actually have more than 1 year of experience working in service company. Now, if they are looking to move to a product company, apart from these two, there are two other aspects as well. There's an entire field of software design, which broadly is in two categories. There is low-level design, which is, by the way, also called as OOPS-based design, object-oriented programming principles-based design. And the second part is high-level design or system design, is again something that you might have heard of multiple times. I'll very quickly describe what those are as well. So low-level design is the art of structuring your code in a way where it is easily extendable. You can add features, remove features. You can add columns, remove columns, add data, remove data, without having to modify your code drastically. A code which is not written following the right design patterns or the right architecture, right schema, becomes unmaintainable over a period of time. And that is in the field of tech termed as tech debt. When you're building things, usually, I mean, the least of concerns is how am I structuring my code. But if you are building code for which will run for the next 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, following the right design patterns becomes very, very important. Just to take an example, imagine you join Facebook, and when you go to Facebook, you find that there is only one file which has tens of millions of lines of code. It will become almost impossible for you to understand that entire code base. It will become almost impossible for you to figure out what to do if you have to fix a bug, something as simple as fixing a bug. Making sure that things are very modular in intuitive locations, making sure that when Facebook adds a feature, then they don't have to rewrite the entire thing. For example, in messages now, if you have to add a scene icon, you don't have to rewrite the entire thing. You just make very little changes, and then that new feature also gets added. Or if tomorrow I want to remove few attributes, that happens very quickly. That entire field is very well researched, and that field is called low-level design or OOPS design. So design patterns are important. If you are somebody who has more than a year of experience, 1+ years of experience, chances are you will be tested on low-level design. Some companies do, some companies don't, but most companies would test you on low-level design. The more your experience, the higher the importance of all design topics. So this becomes very important for people with more than a year of experience. I believe this is very important for all engineers for job performance. Irrespective of your experience, this is important for every engineer. So for job performance, I at least rate it as very, very important. It helps you just adopt easily. The second part of design is high-level design or system design. Now, before I explain what system design is, let me maybe talk about what kind of modes you build your projects in college. In college, you would typically build a project which works on your own laptop, right? Like you have this one machine where things are running. But in the world, there are a lot of applications that run at very, very high scale. For example, if you look at Facebook Messenger, imagine if it did about 50 billion messages being sent every day. Let's say daily there are 50 billion messages being sent. And imagine the size of every message is 500 bytes on average. And this includes not just the message text, but also, let's say, who is the message coming from, who is the message going to, what is the message ID, etc. So some other fields as well. Now, if you multiply these two items, what you'll find is this is approximately 25 terabyte. This is the amount of information being generated in one single day on your Messenger app. 25 terabyte, let that sink in, right? So 25, if you have a very, very high-end machine today, your machine would have a hard disk of size 1 terabyte. It would take 25 machines like yours to store this information. And just storing the information is not enough. You also want to be able to read that information in a particular format. For example, a Kunal might come and say, hey, give me my most recent 5 conversations. Or for my conversation with Rohit, give me my most recent 10 messages. Or by the way, I'm searching for this term coaxing. Show me where all have I used coaxing in all of my conversations. So searching in those conversations is also important. When you start dealing with that scale, where now you can't run a project on one machine, but I mean, the scale is where you have to add like 25 new machines almost every day, then what you enter into the world of distributed systems. You just don't have one machine, but there are so many machines that sort of handle the entire load. And there a bunch of things come into the picture, right? Now, if I'm storing so much of information across machines, where should the information for a particular user go? How do I make sure that when a user asks for their message, it is fetched as soon as possible? So, I mean, how do I cache? How do I shard information, which is split information across these machines? And then if there are certain jobs to be scheduled, what kind of messaging queues, etc. I mean, so there are distributed file systems as well. How do those work? The entire study of all of these components, so that your distributed system, your architecture doesn't break at very, very high scale as well. That field is called system design. If you look at, for example, engineering blogs from Uber or Facebook or Twitter, you'll see a lot of these architectural design being discussed there. It is very important for senior engineers, especially somebody who is either SDE2 or higher. There, this becomes an important component for your movement up the ladder. This is not the only component, but this is a very, very important component for your movement up the ladder. In interviews as well, if you have more than 3 years of experience, chances are you will be grilled on high level design or system design as well. And then then the last piece, and since we're discussing the software engineering curriculum for product, is putting all of this together to implement projects. Projects could be back-end heavy, projects could be front-end heavy, projects could be full stack or back-end only, completely up to you. But you actually have to put it in the form of projects at the end so that you can see all of this in action. And all of these, by the way, any learning in software engineering cannot happen just by consuming only content. You have to practice, you have to write code, you have to consistently write a lot of code to be able to internalize whatever you learn. So those are the topics that are important if you aspire to get into any product company. This is an exhaustive list of what even the interviews would focus on. Interviews would focus on data structures, algorithm, and problem solving. So you'll have a few coding rounds. They will focus on, if you're senior, then they'll start focusing on low-level design, high-level design, and then maybe a round on your previous work, which is not to judge you on the how complicated work you did, but rather your understanding of ownership, your understanding of what you built, and being aware of the decisions that were taken in the product, why those decisions were taken. So that's the entire curriculum, more or less. Now, there's some nuances with respect to roles. Right? For example, imagine I'm going and interviewing for an engineering manager position, entry-level engineering manager position. Now, some of this would be relevant, but apart from all of this, there is also aspects around team building, managing performance of my reportees, making sure my team is productive. There are those aspects as well. Very similarly, imagine I'm a front-end developer. Now, for a front-end developer, yes, DSA is still important. Yes, CS fundamentals are still important. Maybe for interview, a low-level design is very important. High-level design from web architectural standpoint is important. So high-level design is not only everything that happens after the load balancer inside your backend, but it is also what happens on the web stack. For example, how do you cache the multimedia files on CDNs? How do CDNs work? How does in-browser caching work? How do you compress certain amount of data? How is, for example, everything that you see today in front of you is basically your browser rendering a DOM structure, right? So how does that work? What happens when you type google.com in your browser and press enter? Understanding that from byte to byte, all of that information, that is important for a front-end developer. So there are those nuances based on one role to the other, but this remains more or less common. Now, making clear this is not relevant. All of this is probably not relevant if you intend to get into, let's say, a manual QA role at product companies, or you intend to get into DevOps or SRE role in some companies. Some companies will still test for basic coding skills, but some companies might not require you to know DSA, for example. There are other adjacent fields as well. Maybe I'm missing some which might also not require this. So this is the learning part. This is what you learn to be actually become a more well-rounded software developer, which helps you not only crack interviews, but also go and perform well wherever you go. The second part then is, and this is again a query which I keep hearing from a lot of you, is how do I get those job opportunities? How do I even get interviews? So let's say I have prepared. Then what do I do to get those interviews? One is there are a bunch of these job websites you should check out. For example, and these are new age job websites like InstaHire. There is Top Hire. There is AngelList. Usually, if you have done a decent job at preparing your resume, and if you are applying to relevant opportunities, posting personal messages of why you are relevant, most probably you might end up getting a call, irrespective of your service background. And the call means, you get an opportunity to give a test, which might be a written test, but that's enough, right? Like if you're able to learn the right things, then you might be able to do well in the test, and that gets you an entry into interviews, and then interviews lead to an offer. Apart from this, the other thing that might work is maybe approaching relevant people on LinkedIn, people who you feel might be recruiters, people who you feel might be hiring managers, and telling them why you are fit for, let's say, an opening. And there again, like, make sure you're not only applying at, for example, I mean, some people are fixated on just getting into Google, and then Google is the only destination, they're only applying at Google. You have to look at, like, companies, the kind of work they're doing. A lot of companies are doing very interesting work, so maybe try approaching some unconventional companies as well. Try to talk to their hiring managers, explain why you are a great fit, and then maybe you then get interviewed. So the second thing is LinkedIn, approaching people there. And the third thing is, in general, I mean, while all of these are channels, and there are, I mean, job sites as well, you should go and apply on their career website. Apart from this, I mean, one of the prerequisite also is maybe work a little bit on your resume as well. Talk more about what kind of projects have you built. Maybe if they are available for the public to see, post a link about your project. Talk about the impact of the work that you did, instead of saying that I wrote these many lines of code. Maybe mention, if at all there are some achievements to be mentioned, please do mention that. Those always help you stand out. So that's more or less a very, very quick walkthrough of the why of switching from service to product company, and the how of switching from service to a product company. Now, what I would do is, I see a bunch of questions in front of me. I'm going to take those questions one by one, and I'll answer those questions. If you have any questions, please do feel free to post that in the comments. I'm going to pick, I'm not sure whether I'll be able to cover all questions, but I'm going to pick some of these questions and try to answer. All right. So the first question is from Shobha, which is, I have nearly 9 months of experience in service-based company. I want to switch to product-based company. I am learning DSA now and solving them, but my problem is I'm not able to solve medium problems. So Shobha, to be honest, it's a gradual process. So don't be disheartened if you're not able to solve medium level or hard level problems immediately. It's okay. In fact, initially it takes you a lot of time to actually solve certain problems as well. What you should make sure is that you are following a structure. Instead of going randomly to random kind of problems and trying to solve that, follow a structure, because data structures and algorithms is also fairly wide, very, very wide, right? Like, for example, if I say, hey, look, there is going to be one round in the interview that will test you on mathematics. Mathematics is such a vast field. I can't possibly prepare everything around mathematics. But like, there are certain topics that are relevant. They are in increasing order of difficulty. They have dependencies with other topics. If you follow a structured path, then the journey becomes easier for you, instead of just going in random patterns. And give yourself some time. It's okay. Initially, it takes time, but over a period of time, you'll start to catch up. Cool. Let's maybe look at the next problem statement, which is from Subbu, which is, I have more than 5 years of experience in Spring Boot and microservices. I'm planning to move to product-based. Half of the question is actually in a different comment, which is, what is the possibility if I take Scalar course? So I did not talk about Scalar course in today's session. Maybe I can give a very small gist. So all of what I talked about in the topics list, everything is also covered in Scalar Academy as a course, where we do regular live classes, where a teacher comes and teaches you in a class where you can ask doubts. Teachers are people like me. I'm, for example, a teacher at Scalar Academy. And apart from that, then there is a community, because there are a bunch of people learning with you. So there is a lot of peer-to-peer interaction. There are TAs that help you with your assignments and homework. Every single student gets a one-on-one mentor to sort of help guide them. So just to answer your question very quickly, Scalar is going to give you a very structured path. It is going to give you a lot of support to learn all of this. At the end of the day, it has to be you learning those things. We will make sure that you're spending your effort, whatever number of hours of effort you're spending in a day, you're spending those effort in the right direction, and you're not getting stuck. If you're getting stuck, there are people to help you. That's our responsibility. A lot of effort, hard work, etc., will still be your responsibility. Okay, let's look at the next question. The question is, there is no name, but the question is, if I am from a tier 3 company with 4 years of experience, will they ask HLD, or can I tell them to take on LLD? So usually the rounds are defined with respect to a role. Imagine I'm applying for a SD1 role. Now there, depending on whether I am a fresher or I have some amount of experience, I might be mapped to a entry-level SD role or slightly higher SD1 role. All SD1s are also not equal. Depending on that, there is already a definition at most companies of what rounds are they going to have. For example, And Amazon might say that, hey, look, I mean, for all SD1s or maybe higher SD1s, we have most rounds that are data structures heavy. And maybe one round where there will be some discussion on low level design. There is not going to be any rounds on high level design. In that case, they will not ask you a high level design. That being said, rarely does it happen that you tell them, hey, look, I'm not comfortable with high level design. Please swap this round for a low level design. That rarely happens. Companies have some defined processes. They try to judge people on that. Just adding one more fact there. So a lot of new age Indian startups, for example, companies like Flipkart, Udan, they also do one round, which is called as machine coding round. It's termed as machine coding round. And this also, by the way, happens for almost all levels, where they give you a problem statement, which is more of a project style problem statement. For example, one of the problem statement could be, hey, I've given you this API using which, if you give it a city and a date, it will fetch you the weather information for that date. So build a weather app using this API, which again, like, fetches me a bunch of information, maybe for forecast for the next 7 days, etc. On one single app, which is something you build just in an hour and a half. And then the interviewer has discussion with you, discussing why you chose a particular low level design, why you chose a particular class structure, why is, let's say, this object not inherited from that object, etc. So that kind of discussion happens. There is one more question, which is a suggestion. Actually, it's less of a question, it's more of a suggestion. It would be great if Scalar also focuses on front-end content. Your back-end content is great, but not all people want to go into back-end. Congrats on getting Arnav into your team. He's a great mentor. Thank you. Arnav is a great addition to the team. We're just much stronger with him and there with us. That being said, the curriculum is not really back-end only. In the curriculum, if you see, let me actually mark the pieces that are relevant for a front-end developer as well. And I'm talking about, again, like front-end developers that aspire to work at great product companies. DSA and problem solving is still important for them. CS fundamentals are still important for them. Low-level design is still important for them. In high-level design, there is web architecture, which is super relevant and important for them. Maybe there are certain storage-related material which is not relevant for them. And then in the projects within Scalar Academy, at least, there is a split. Either you can do a backend project or you can do a full stack project. Full stack is actually very, very front-end heavy. Here, there are classes on functional programming. There are classes on core JavaScript, React.js, and then you build something using React.js, one basic project and one more capstone, larger scale project. So we do focus on front-end. In fact, there are a bunch of people who have graduated from Scalar Academy who are now in senior or very senior front-end roles at different companies. Shobha has another question, which is, within next year, I want to crack product-based. In that case, what all should I cover, LLD or HLD? Please clear me. Now, my current experience as service-based company is 9 months. So if you have only 9 months of experience, I wouldn't recommend that go very heavy on high-level design. That's probably overkill. The most important bit for you is polishing your problem-solving skills, polishing your coding skills, getting great with DSA, and maybe then some amount of low-level design. Projects are still important. Build something that you can showcase. That is just application of what you know. This next question is from Dhaval, which is, do we need to prepare for our tech/tool we worked upon, as in technology specific to data engineering, data scientists, or for example, big data related framework technology apart from DSA, HLD, LLD? So if you are from a different domain, yes, there is typically one round which is specific to your domain. So for example, let's say I am a data engineer and I work very closely with Hive, then there is going to be one round where my previous work would be discussed. It will be discussed what role I had to play. And for the technologies that I was working with, I would be questioned on those technologies. This is not to say that you should be aware of all technologies, but rather just checking that whatever work you were doing on a day-to-day basis, were you actually really, really deeply involved or not? People who are passionate about their work, they understand not just the code they write, but everything around it as well. So that's what most interviews want or are checking for in those rounds. There is another question which is from Mayank, which is, as of now, I have 5 years of experience, but I only know SQL and Tableau tools. So how to move to product-based company? Mayank, from what I understand, you currently might be in analytics heavy role. In that case, there are two tracks, right? Like you can switch to a product company as in an analytics role, and in that case, all of what I mentioned is probably not as relevant. Data scientist, yes, still relevant, but data analytics or business analytics or product analytics might not be. You might not be a great coder. That's still okay. So that could be probably the way to look at the switch, and then maybe then internally you switch into a software engineering role if you find that exciting. It is important to not only be swayed by what I'm telling you here, it is also important to keep your interests in mind when you make these decisions. What do you really, really love doing? If you love software engineering, sure, go for it. But in case you want to learn, Mayank, so what I would suggest is maybe the first step is you pick up one programming language. I'm sure like Python or R might be closest. So pick that up. Start to maybe solve or start writing some code, some scripts in Python that will start to get you a little acquainted. And then there are a bunch of these websites which I can refer to. Maybe start solving problems there. For example, InterviewBit is a free website. We should probably check it out. LeetCode, InterviewBit, Geeks for Geeks. Should check those websites out. You should start solving some problems there. Another question, which is in Scalar, are there additional classes for tech stack used in backend projects? For example, Node.js, TypeScript, Spring Boot, etc. Yes, there are. So when you enter the project mode here, as you can see on my screen, you have an option. There's an option that is given to you to either specialize in backend or full stack. If, for example, you specialize in backend, then you can choose between backend technology. For example, Spring Boot you can choose, and there will be Spring Boot specific classes, and then you build projects, and there will be some amount of review there. Or, for example, if you pick full stack, and in full stack you say that, hey, look, I'm going to build something on MERN tech stack, which is React.js and Node.js, then sure, there will be React.js and Node.js specific classes. There's another question, which is, should I just learn front-end and crack the companies, or is it good to have both front-end and back-end for product-based? Because I see front-end role in LinkedIn. Being a front-end engineer is great. There is no foundation whatsoever to say that I have to pick up another tech stack or another language. If you're good in front-end, if you know JavaScript, if using JavaScript, you can solve all kinds of problems. You understand how libraries would work inside. I would strongly advise continue in the front-end domain. Very, very highly qualified front-end engineers are very, very rare to find, and therefore very, very highly paid. So nothing wrong whatsoever in just continuing specializing in front-end. Just be a great front-end engineer. By the way, like great front-end engineers still are good with DSA. So we can't skip that. They're still good with LLD. You can't skip that. There is another question, which is how difficult is it for someone in front end with 10 plus years of experience to get good tech company? Can you throw some info on that? Do companies judge you based on your current experience too? So to be honest, as I said, like good front end engineers are still a lot in demand because there are so very few of them. So it is completely possible to switch in a senior front end engineering role in a product company. Very, very feasible. The place where most front-end engineers fail is that the first few rounds will still test you on your problem-solving skills, on your data structure skills, and most front-end engineers never even touch that. They believe that's probably not for us, and that's where probably the gap is. If you can bridge that, and if you are good with OOPS design, if you're good with LLD, and you've done some bit of work in the past, you can talk about the work that you've done for the last 10 years, where like you can show that you've taken ownership. That's more than enough. There is another question, which is from Harshita, which is, I'm working as a software engineer with 2.9 years in an automotive company. I was interviewed at Amazon 6 months back for SD1. Unfortunately, I couldn't crack it. I was not asked system design, but moving on further, should I concentrate on system design as I'm close to 3 years in a couple of months? So Harshita, maybe when you interviewed, it depends very, very heavily on what kind of role, what seniority of the role. So if at all they did not test you on LLD or HLD, anything 6 months back, chances are they might not again. That being said, usually rejections happen at various rounds. So for example, let's say I am an engineer. I might have done well in my coding test, and then I got interviewed for 2 rounds, and then let's say for whatever reason I got rejected. Maybe if I did well in those 2 rounds, then I went through maybe 1 or 2 more rounds. I mean, because there typically are 4 or 5 rounds that you have to clear to be into Amazon. So maybe LLD might have still been there. Maybe just you might not have reached there. I would say if I was you, I would focus on DSA specific preparation. I would focus still on LLD because you don't know, you might still face it. And I would still focus on being able to talk about my previous work in depth. Your current domain, as in like if you're a software engineer, even if you're working for an automotive company, that does not matter. That's okay. Most product companies don't care about domains. E-commerce companies very readily hire from all kinds of domain, be it automotive, be it edtech, be it fintech, everywhere. I mean, it's just quality of engineers that is important. There's another question from Swapnil, which is academic matters for joining product-based companies with industry skills? So more and more with time, companies are doing away with let's say your pedigree, and they focus more on skills. So it doesn't matter you come from a tier 3 college or a tier 3 company, as long as you're capable, as long as you're great with, again, some of what I discussed today, as long as you're a great software engineer, most product companies are happy hiring. And why wouldn't they? Because usually people who come from those kind of backgrounds, if for example I have seen that if we take a bet on those kind of engineers, they just are more hardworking because they have a point to prove. So it is always I mean it's finding diamond in rough, but if you can find somebody like that, it's always has its return. So companies are very okay looking at people without pedigree as well, as long as you're great at what you do. Anil has a question, which is, do we need to learn C++, Java for backend engineering job? I have background in Python and JavaScript. Will it be enough? Again, the tech stack does not matter. So service companies would look at a specific tech stack. Most product companies don't. Some product companies still do. For example, if you look at most banks look for a Java background because most of their code currently is in Java, and then they are rigid on that aspect. But like a lot of, again, new age e-commerce companies, tech companies, fintech companies, they don't care about what tech stack. They're okay as, I mean, you could be great with Python, you could be great with Ruby, you could be great with C#, as long as you're great at problem solving, as long as you've done some interesting work in the past, as long as you can do LLD, HLD, I mean, a lot of companies would be happy to hire you. Don't need to switch your tech stack. I mean, that's something I would not recommend. In general, one of the things is like, be prepared that once you enter a product company, you might be allocated different teams, and different teams would have different tech stack. For example, when I went to Facebook, I was primarily a C++ coder. The first team I was assigned to was working primarily in PHP. So I learned PHP, I wrote a bunch of code in PHP. Within 6 months, I moved to a different team that was heavy on Java. Again, Java I had never worked on. I learned Java, I started contributing in Java. And then another team which was in Python. So you have to become somebody who is good with learning a new language, and you'll realize that if you understand one language in depth, all other languages are very similar. They have almost one-on-one correlation with patterns. The only difference is that when you go to a functional programming language like JavaScript or Lisp, then there is some difficulty initially to understand that language. But all procedural programming languages like C++, Java, Python, Ruby, they're very similar in nature. There is another question, which is from Dinesh. I am a MERN stack developer. I am a fresher, which is 2021 pass out. I'll be joining a service-based company within 2 to 3 months. How can I go for a product-based company? Dinesh, I mean, the answer is very simple. As I said, the how is 2 parts. One is learning the required topics. In your case, since you're a fresher, data structures, algorithms is important. Having one project, I mean, since you are a MERN stack developer, I'm sure you would have a project that you would have the code base on GitHub, or host that project on a Heroku app or AWS, so that anybody can access your website and then go through the quality. So project and DSA, those are 2 most important aspects. As long as you know that, the second step is applying to companies. But again, like, very important that you are prepared, right? When you do get that opportunity at a company where you would want to go and work, you want to make that opportunity count. And that comes from learning the right thing. So please do judge yourself well on where you stand with respect to these 2 topics. Okay, there are 2 questions from Nikhil and Harsh. I'm going to take one of them. They're very similar in nature. The question is it possible to switch from QA to development? If yes, how Scalar will help me? Let me first answer the question without Scalar, right? So switches from QA to development happen all the time. It isn't that if you started your career as a QA developer, then you're stuck there. A lot of people move into dev heavy roles if they like dev heavy roles. And QA, by the way, is also a very wide term. It refers to, there's manual QA, there's automation QA, there are people who are called as SDETs who are actually developers. They just build infrastructure for testing. So I'm assuming you mean either a manual QA or an automation QA, because SDET is almost already an engineer. So the switches from QA to development happen all the time. The thing I would suggest, if you were asking me as for my advice, would be, one, show that you have intent to move to development. How do you do that? You build a personal project on your own time. You host it at a place where anybody can see your source code. They can also go and check out your website to see the quality of the work that you've done. Two is the topics I have mentioned today, which is practice on data structures algorithm. Get really, really good at coding, and like study some bits about CS fundamentals, LLD, HLD, if you can find time to do so. And then, sure, I mean, you might have to knock multiple doors. You might have to apply at maybe 10 different companies to get one call. But that one call is all that matters. You don't have to succeed multiple times. You have to do the switch once from QA to development. So there's another question, which is, should a 5-year experienced person look for SD2, or is it fine if we go for SD1 also for product based? So I would say, like, the leveling, you can leave it to the companies. Companies would figure out like what level do you fit at. For example, even if I'm interviewing you for an SD2 position, and I find you very strong on SD1 aspects, but maybe not so strong on SD2 aspects, usually there is an SD1 hire call that is made in such a case, in case there are positions available on SD1. And vice versa. If I started interviewing you for an SD1 role, but I felt through the interview process that you're actually maybe a better fit for SD2, the other way also happens in a lot of cases. So don't worry about that. I mean, worst cases, you probably get hired a level below. You should have been hired as an SD2, you get hired as an SD1. That will correct itself in a year or so. And I mean, you just get more chance to get familiar with this new organization. That is the worst case, which is not such a bad worst case. Ujjwal has another question, which is, what if someone is not getting the relevant system design experience in their current company? Ujjwal, then you are in the same bucket as 99% of the engineers. Unfortunately, there's only very, very little amount of work that gets you the real relevant system design experience. Most people don't. What is important, however, is that you shouldn't let that dictate your current learning levels. You should still strive to learn more. I mean, if you're not going through a structured course, what I would advise is that a lot of companies, high scale companies, have blogs, engineering blogs, where they talk about certain architectural decisions that they took. So do that. Maybe pick certain problems, or let's say, like, imagine you are designing a Twitter or a Facebook. Maybe try to design that yourself and get it reviewed by somebody senior in your team. They might be able to point out where you're making a mistake. So to be honest, again, like, you're in the same boat as 99% of the software engineers. Not everybody gets to work on very high scale, which is fine, but don't let that hinder your learning. Okay, there's one more question from Manpreet, which is, could you please explain how Scalar helps mobile developers? So Manpreet, like, we don't have a special track for mobile developers. That being said, there is a lot of overlap. For example, an Android engineer would again still be grilled on data structures, algorithm, problem solving, low level design. These topics still remain relevant for a mobile engineer too, because a lot of mobile engineers also keep switching back and forth. However, this is not enough. For a mobile engineer, there is going to be a lot of things which are specific to the mobile tech stack. The bunch of things you should understand on how they work in the mobile ecosystem, which currently is not covered in Scalar. So Scalar can help you partially, not completely, as it could probably do for a back-end full stack or a front-end engineer. Ankur says, I'm having 3+ years of experience. So is there anything apart from DSA I should prepare? Ankur, you'll see here, I've mentioned the years of experience with topic as well. I would say, like, as you start venturing in the 3+ years experience range, then everything starts to become important. And as you'll keep growing in experience, these design topics will start to become more and more important. Right now they might still, I mean, you might be at a stage where if you just do okay on HLD or LLD, then even then it should be fine. All right, I'll take the final two questions. Question number one: if we do freelancing after 1 year of experience in startup, so after 2 to 3 years, can we get job as front-end developer in product company if I build library in front end and understood front end to end? Oh, absolutely. By the way, freelancing experience is in no way inferior to actually working for a company, as long as what you were working on was holistic and wasn't just that you took very small WordPress kind of projects and you just delivered on those. As long as you were still doing software development and freelancing, that is at par with any software development experience working in a company. So if you are actually building libraries for front end, that is high quality front end work. I mean, that's absolutely. The answer is definitely yes. There's one final question that I can pick from here. Okay, one final question, which is from Devendra, which is, can you mention some blog where we can view structural decisions made by them? It will be of great help. So there is Facebook's engineering blog is called engineering.fb.com. There is, if you just search for Uber engineering blog, you'll find that as well. There, a lot of times, because I remember during my time when we had released messages, we had published one article just talking about architecture of how Facebook messages and Facebook Messenger works. What happens with a message? Where does it go? Where does it get cached, etc. So you'll find some articles that have entire design, architecture, everything built in. Those are fun to read as well if you like reading. So do go through that. That being said, by the way, there are some good channels on YouTube as well for system design. I mean, we also have some content, but Gaurav Sen has very decent content, which is, if you have to just consume content. Tushar Roy has great content, so you can go and watch that. To be honest, however, I mean, just one part is consuming content, the other is being able to design things yourself. So there is both way important. Just like when you're learning coding, one is understanding syntax, but actually writing code is also important, right? Very similarly with design as well, it is important to practice on certain problem statements and get that validated through somebody who tells you what might go wrong. All right. Thank you so much for listening to me rant on for about an hour or so. I hope this was very, very helpful. If this was helpful, I would request you guys to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We keep doing content like this every weekend. There will be more useful content in the future as well if you like this. But thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you guys in future session as well.